So to start off, we need a little bit more room. So we are going to take these ground sprites and we're going to make a few more of them so that it goes to the left. Okay, so now we've got quite a few of them. Then we're going to create a new object under here called house. And we're going to give it a sprite renderer. And then we're going to set a sprite to just be this house. Go back to game, or sorry, scene. We are going to set its sorting layer to be environment. And then we're going to make it really big. And then we're going to flip it and we're going to drag it over here. That might be a little bit too big. We want it to look like a house. That seems about right. So it looks like the house is in the background. Then we need to make sure that we give our ground more of a collider. And then increase our other collider as well. And now we can take our player, move them back, and have them spawn in front of the house. However, we don't want our environment to be in front of our player. Our player needs to be in front of everything. Our environment is going to be above the background. Okay. So now you're going to notice that it is hard to see everything. And that is because our camera isn't following our player. So we need our camera to follow our player. This is super easy. We're going to create a new component down here called camera controller. Then we just need access to our player's transform so we can move our camera to it. And then under update, we're going to type in transform dot position equals new vector 3 player dot position dot x 0 and -1. So basically we don't want to move our camera's Z or Y axis. So we're leaving them and hard coding them as these values. But we do want to move its X axis to follow the player's position. So then if we go back to Unity, you'll notice that player is going to come underneath this camera controller. So then we're going to drag them in, click start. And now our camera is following our player. You'll notice that the background here is not where it should be. So we are going to duplicate it again. And then just add an extra background here. We'll click play. Okay, so now we've got our player, we've got our house, we've got our gem, we've got these spikes. Now we're going to start creating some platforms. Okay, so we're going to start creating different platforms that do different things. So I'm going to duplicate this platform here. And then I'm going to remove all the ground sprites, so except for one. And then I'm going to move it so that I can see it. I'm going to zoom in on it. Actually, we need to change its colliders to match it before we zoom in on it. There we go. Now we can zoom in and adjust accordingly. So I'm going to bring this platform over to about here. Then I'm going to give it a rigid body because we want this platform to be able to move. So after the rigid body has been added, we're going to change its body type from dynamic to kinematic because we don't want the platform to fall as soon as we load the game as though it has physics. We want the platform to fall when we land on it. So we're going to choose that. We want to make sure we freeze its rotation. And then we're going to create a new script called falling platform. So we're going to reference our rigid body. And we're also going to want to keep track of our start position. That way we can respawn the platform to where it was when it first started. And then we may not always want to respawn our platform, so we're going to have a public bool respawns. And then on start, we're going to set start position equals transform dot position. Now we're going to have a void on collision enter 2D. Collision 2D collision. So this is going to trigger when our player's box collider touches this box collider. We're going to say if collision dot game object dot tag equals player, then RB dot kinematic equals false. So essentially we're going to say, okay, now you can start falling. Then we're going to have another on trigger enter 2D collider 2D collision. And we're going to say if collision.tag equals bounds, and we want to be able to respawn, then set our kinematic back to true, and then set our velocity to stop moving, because otherwise it'll fall down and it'll just keep falling. So we want to reset our velocity to 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to set transform.position equal to start position. Okay, so that was a whole bunch of stuff. We need to make sure, did we actually tag our bounds as bounds? We did not. So we're going to add a new tag called bounds. And just for a recap, that was what's down below that causes the player to get hurt. Okay, let's see exactly what happens. So we jump on the platform. The variable RB of falling platform has not been assigned. Okay. So we did not reference it in our start. So RB equals get component rigid body 2D. Let's try that again. Okay, so now our platform is falling, and you can see once it reaches our bounds, I can just drag my player over here. Once it reaches the bounds, it immediately jumps back up to its start position. However, if we go to our platform, was it this one? Yes. And if we set response to false, and then we jump on it, it will no longer respawn. So we're going to rename this to falling platform. That way we don't mix it up with the other ones. And then finally, just for fun, we're going to create another gem. And we're going to put it right on top of it. Okay, so now that we've created our falling platform, we're going to create a moving platform. I'm just going to copy and paste this falling platform and rename it to moving platform. And then I'm going to remove the falling platform script, remove the rigid body. And then I'm going to drag it up over to here. And then I'm going to get the move along path controller. I'm going to set its size to be 2 for the set paths. And then I'm going to copy in its current position. Then I'm going to drag its Y up a little bit to about here. I'm going to copy that in with the same X value. And then if we click start, you'll see we have this platform moving very quickly. We're going to set its speed to 1. So let's do that, set its speed to 1. So as you can see, it's bumping us a little bit. We're just going to take its minimum Y value and move it up just a little bit so that it doesn't do that. Okay. So now we're going to go to our game master and we're going to set our max time to be 100 so that we don't keep running out. Or I guess we can set it to 99. And then we're going to give our player a bit more jump. So if we go down to our player controller, wherever that may be, we can look for our jump force and maybe set it to like 6. That way they can jump just a little bit higher. So that's quite a bit higher. So we're going to set it down to 5. Okay, so that's perfect. So now we can jump onto our moving platform. So you're going to notice a little bit of a bug. As the moving platform falls, the player does too. And this is because the player and the moving platform are two completely separate things. So the platform moves down, and then the player falls down on top of it. But what we can do is set a player to be a child of the moving platform. And what this will do is the player will be able to move on its own, but then at the exact same time, when the platform moves down, it also moves the player with it. So it's seamless. So if we drag our player onto our moving platform, you'll notice now that we're no longer experiencing those bugs. And we're still able to jump and move and do all of that stuff. However, you'll notice there are some bugs when we're no longer on our platform, because right now it's trying to move our player with our platform. So what we're going to do in order to fix all these things is when we touch the platform, we're going to say, make the player our child. And then when we stop touching the platform, we're going to make it so that our player is no longer the child anymore. To do this, we're going to open our player controller, and we're going to type in void on collision enter 2D, collision 2D, collision. We're going to say if collision dot tag equals, it's going to be collision dot game object dot tag equals moving platform. Then set transform dot parent equal to collision.gameObject.transform. And then we're going to have the exact same thing. We're going to copy this whole thing, except for it's going to be on collision exit 2D. And then we're going to say transform.parent equals null. So if we collide with our moving platform, set our parent to be the moving platform so that we move with it. And then otherwise, we do not want anything to be parenting us. Next, we also want a variable up here called public bool on moving platform. We're going to set that to false. And then here we're going to set it on moving platform to be false. And then on moving platform to be true. And then what we can do is during this is grounded, we can set it so that if on moving platform is grounded equals true. Else, we'll calculate whether we're on the ground. And this will save our code. Our code will no longer have to do this physics2d.overlap area, which is a little bit more efficient because we already know for sure we're on the ground. So then our last thing that I believe we need to do is go to our moving platform, our ground collider, and then set this tag to be moving platform. And since we only have our ground to be moving platform, and our other collider is not, we will only become parented to the ground when we land on top of it. So let's see if all of this works. Okay, so as you can see, the player is becoming a child of the platform, and then they are becoming not a child of the platform as soon as they jump off of it. So that's working great. It's a little hard to jump onto the platform. We could give our player a bit of a higher jump if we wanted to. Or we could just add another object called like block. Give it a sprite renderer. And then drag in the block. We'll go to our scene so that we can see it a little better. Make it a little bigger. Set its sorting layer to be environment. And then we'll give it a ground collider. So box collider 2D. This is way too big. We're going to set it to just be the ground. Whoops. Drag that in there. Drag that in there. And then we can copy and paste it. And in this next one, we'll drag the ground down. And then we'll rename this one to other collider. And then set our ground tag to be ground. Or maybe it was layer. Layer has to be ground. I think that should work with everything else. So now we should be able to just move this block over to here. And then use it to step. So one thing that I'd like to point out is if you start noticing bugs where you walk into the collider and you can't jump and some things like a little bit off are happening, chances are what's happening is you've made the ground too small. And so there's these two box colliders, this ground and this other collider, and they're not actually touching. And because of that, there's like this little spot in the middle that won't have a collider. So when you get into that spot and then you hit the collider above it, it won't be a smooth transition. So we're going to make this ground a little bit bigger. And then this is too big over here too, so we're going to drag that in. But basically what you want to make sure is that the x coordinates are identical. This way, when they jump, it'll be very smooth, and then you want to make sure they're overlapping by just a little bit. Let's test this out again. There, and it seems like we are not running into the bugs we were running into before. Okay, so now we can easily get onto our platform. Now you can technically remove the block if you want it to be a little bit harder. That's cool too. It's up to you. Now I'm going to add another moving platform. I'm going to put it over here. That way it's right over the spike pit. And this move along path, we're going to set its X to start right here. And we're going to set its Y to be here as well. And then we're going to move it over to about here, right in the middle, and copy that X in there as well. Now if we load the game again, we'll have these moving platforms. And then finally, we're going to copy another gem. And we're going to put it right above where that platform would be. So another little mini bug that I'm noticing is that if we jump on the side of this platform and you look really close, once we reach the ground, even though we're jumping in the air, it will transition to our idle sprite. And it looks very finicky, and it sets our is jumping to be false. And basically the problem here is we're jumping in the air but still touching the ground as we go by. So this is actually a pretty easy solution. Code-wise, because all we need to do is in our player controller set another stipulation where else if is jumping. So if we're going up, then is grounded has to be false. Even if we're touching the ground, if we're going in the air, we're not technically grounded because we're still going up. We only want to be able to touch the ground if we're falling. So now if we reload this, it should no longer be doing that. Awesome.